Hello, please can you tell us your name and a little bit about yourself?
My name is Bridget Hersant. I am 57 and I live in Bunjo. Today we're going to talk about my hobbies, which are looking at wildflowers and finding out about them, and stones and fossils. I think the most unusual and surprising thing I found is a cave bear's tooth. I can't remember how many millions of years ago it was, but it's quite a long, or at least it's sort of 800,000 years ago. And I found it in the local area in a disused quarry. And I was really pleased to find out that it was a cave bear's tooth. Nobody knew what it was because there's lots of sponges and sponge fossils. And I went onto the National Natural History Museum's Facebook page, and the people on there were saying, oh, it's just a coral or a fossil and you never find anything in Hertfordshire, there's no good fossils. And I thought they are, because they're exciting to me, even if they're very common and not very good. So it was really good, because I thought, this isn't a sponge. I knew that much at that time to think this isn't a sponge. Anyway, I went to a place where I displayed my collection, and I just happened upon a person who was really interested, and I happened to show her, and she said, my dad specialises in fossil sponges and corals. And she said, let me take a picture of it and I'll ask him. And he emailed me back and he said, I'm not quite sure what it is. It's not a sponge or a coral. He said, so I asked some other experts that I know in the fossil, it's not an industry, is it? But in fossils, and they got back and thought it was this cave bear's tooth. And I was well happy and jumped up and down, and I felt like I wanted to go back on Facebook and say, there, told you it wasn't a sponge or a coral. But there's no point in doing that. I have lots of little different ones that are quite cute. I don't know all of the names and things because, to be honest, I'm not quite into doing all of that. But I do like looking at them and thinking how many years old they are, and I love the patterns that they make in the stones. So there are so many wildflowers, and you can't always identify them. Sometimes they're hard to identify because there are so many different species that are very, very similar to each other. So you'll get things in the mint family that look really similar, or the dead nettle family that you suddenly think, well, that looks exactly like that. And then suddenly you'll see that the reason it's not that is because there's tiny little detail. In fact, one of those is wild pansies or wild violets. They're really hard to identify, and it's literally one little thing at the back of the flower that will make all the difference. But they look really, really similar. So, but yeah, there's lots of times when I haven't been able to identify, but I look them up, so I try to. Well, there's a couple actually. There's one called cud marsh, or marsh cud or something. Can't remember what it was, but there's one, and it's really unattractive flower. But it's not really, really rare, but it's not widespread, and I've seen it a couple of times in our fields out the back. And there's another one that I found, I can't remember the name of it, but it's like a purple one that I found over again at Waterford Heath, and it was growing, and I think that is on the endangered list, or it's starting to become quite rare. So there are a few flowers that you find about that you suddenly think, oh, that's quite rare. I don't think I've really found anything really rare. I think our local quarry is really good for stones and fossils. You can find quite a few things there: oyster shells, as I say, corals and sponges, bear's teeth. But I think beaches and coasts are quite good. In Easter we're visiting Somerset, and there's a beach there that's really good for fossils. So you can see ammonites actually in big rocks. And also down on the Dorset coast, down that way, Charmouth way, there's some really good places there. In fact, it's known for called the Jurassic coastline. So there's loads of fossils there, and you can pretty much walk along and just find one. In fact, we were only talking the other day about how when my son George was young, he picked up some seaweed, and he was going, "Look, Mum, look! I found this, and it's attached to a rock." And I said, never mind about the seaweed. And he was fascinated by the seaweed. I said, never mind about the seaweed. Turn that rock over. Because as you turned it over, I had an ammonite on it. and then the other side was still stuck in the sand on the mud, so that was quite good. I should really take a log of where I found them, but I do with my flowers actually. I always take, if I see a different flower, I'll take a photo of it, and because of modern technology now, it's great because it comes up on the photo where you took it. So I have actually made a little album of all the flowers I've seen. I mean, I've added to it now, but so it's a little book really, and it's got underneath where it come from and what time of year, so whether it was March or April or whatever. So that's been quite handy actually, because I write an article in a local magazine called On the Doorstep, and so it's quite good for looking up what the next article might be. So I look at the album and say, oh, this was taken in March or this was taken in August. These type of flowers are flat blooming then. I'll write about those. So yeah, so I do take a sort of log. Fossils and stones. I loved stones when I was a child. When we went to the beach, I was always picking up shells and stones, but I like the stones more because I loved all the patterns. And I loved the fact that they were like hard, solid things, but they were so beautiful. There were so many different colours. And then I realised that you could find fossils as well. And then that was like amazing, because it was like, oh my gosh, you can find things that are like animals that were soft have turned into stone. So I found that fascinating, and I carried on enjoying looking for stones and fossils. And then my love of flowers, I would say I've always liked flowers, but I was about 16, 17 and I took our family dog for a walk. And I saw this plant that I'd never actually seen before. And I looked it up and it fascinated me because the common name for it, one of the common names for it, was Old Granny's Slipper Sloppers. And I just loved the fact that it had this funny name. So then I was thinking, well, what are other flowers called? So I started taking more interest. And then I would say I'd always been quite interested. And then one year, about 10 years ago or so, I thought, actually, you know what? Because lots of people get the impression that we haven't got much floral, wild flowers and things. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to have a look and see what we have got on our doorstep. Hence my article in the magazine is called On the Doorstep. So I decided to make a real effort to look at all the flowers and remember their names. So that's why I started taking photos, because then every year I'd look back and go, oh yeah, that's a agrimony, or that's a wild violet, or that's a whatever it is. So yeah, that's how I started really, and yeah, how old I was. So I've been doing it a long time. I think it is really important, because for other generations really, I think it's, we can't just build stuff everywhere, and just because those species and plants will die out and not be around anymore. But having said that, I do think there is a natural process of species dying out and other species coming back. But you know what? I think you'd be really hard to kill nature off, because I know we have done with some species, but there are flowers that suddenly appear. Like there was a flower that appeared on a rooftop in London that hadn't been seen in this country for decades, and all of a sudden it's back again. And I always think about buildings as well. Buildings, we build these buildings, you leave them alone and nature will take over again. So nature is very powerful and resilient, but yeah, we do need to make sure that we ourselves don't overdo it and, take too many resources and ruin what we have. I don't think there's any specific time, because each season brings different flowers. So, in spring you'll be looking for primroses, daffodils, wood anemone, all those type of things, and then the bluebells. And so gradually as it goes on, and there's other things like ground ivy that flowers between March and June. But each season brings on more flowers and different flowers. I suppose the most prolific season is probably between May and September, when you get most flowers. But yeah, from spring onwards up until sort of October time, you'll be able to find some sort of flowers about. Oh, it actually teaches a lot. The wildflowers not quite... Well, no, actually even the wildflowers do in a way, because there's certain wildflowers that you find. There's like one called sainfoil, and that is actually grown. I found it on the side of a road, but it's actually grown as a fodder for cattle. So I learned that around here farmers have grown that to feed their cattle. Same as another one, a Phacelia. It's a purpley type flower with a bit spiky, and it was just growing on the side, and that is also used for livestock fodder as well. So that was quite interesting. And yeah, probably the fossils and the stones are more likely to teach us about this area, because I've found out since I've been looking at stones and fossils around this area that a lot of the fossils were brought down with the glacial move, and where we live in Hertfordshire, the glacier sort of ended, but it brought down with it all this gravel and stones and fossils with it. So it teaches you about that, and the fact that actually here was like a shallow sort of sea, and all up slightly up north towards Sandy that way, hence it was called Sandy, because they had very sandy soil up there. So all of that was under a shallow sea, and because I was looking at that, I then learnt about the fact that the Thames actually used to come up and near Pan's Hanger, where we are here, up and out, and it went out further up Essex, so the mouth of the Thames was further up than what it is now, but obviously as it's changed its course and it's now going through London that way, which I find incredibly fascinating, because it's a huge river and you think to yourself, how did it change its course? But quite often you can get a feel for what, as you look and find fossils, you get a feel of what's just going to be a stone and what might be a fossil. So they'll have a slightly different shape, they might have a crack or a line around them, and actually in this area a little bit further north you can tell, because they're quite chalky, because we've got the Chilterns going around, so you can find things like bivalves, like oysters type shells, and then they're actually really quite chalky, made out of the chalk, so that's quite easy to spot. And they tend to, and up there they tend to fall apart, so you pick it up and think, oh, what's that, and then it will fall apart and there's the fossil. But yeah, it is a bit tricky actually. The rocks that I find, I clean up and I put them on the windowsills, or I've got a little display box over there. The flowers I find, I don't tend to pick the flowers, because you're not meant to pick the flowers, but if there are some, if I do anything to preserve flowers, I might pick them out of my garden. So I might find some weeds like herb robert or something like that, and then I press them, and I've got a picture over the back there that's a pressed flower. But yeah, that's how I preserve them.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been nice talking to you.